Well, welcome once again. This is Nick, the Doctor of Digital, and what I want to do is to introduce you to transform your life with business and life with education and inspiration. I introduce busy people to trends in ideas and improving your life by highlighting authors you should know. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to grow up in a world where racism and prejudice were a constant presence? In her powerful historical novels, Lost Seeds, The Beginning, and Lost Seeds, The Legacy, author Teresa Mosley Sebastian takes readers on a journey through the struggles and triumphs of two brothers, Dub and Tim Brisco, as they navigate the challenges of the Jim Crow South. Join us as we explore the themes of family, legacy, and resilience in this compelling and thought-provoking conversation. Teresa is a multi talented author, attorney, entrepreneur, law school professor, and philanthropist. With a background in law and a passion for storytelling, Sebastian brings a unique perspective to her writing. Her historical novels have received widespread acclaim, including the 2025 B.R.A.G Medallion Honoree, 2024 Independent Publishers Bronze Award winner for Best Adult Fiction Ebook, and finalist for the 2023 Foreword INDIES Book of the Year awards. Her writing has been praised for its elegance, authenticity, and ability to transport readers into the world of her characters. During this episode, we'll do a deep dive into the changes and topics of creating a vision for family and legacy. I will leverage the expertise of my guests and how to navigate the unique dynamics of these ideas. By the end of this episode, you'll be better equipped to know what to do and encourage you to contact my guest, Teresa Mosley Sebastian, author. With that, I want to welcome Teresa to the program. Good to see you today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. So fascinating topics, of course, and love to dive into this deeply. So I'm curious, and a lot of people are curious as well. What was the inspiration? How did you get started? And of course, the $64,000 question, why are you writing?
Well, I'm writing right now because I finally have time.
Okay, practical.
Yeah, this is a very practical answer. But it's something that's always been in the back of my mind, in the back of my being. And I again found the time. The story just it kind of rained down on me, and I keep explaining it that way because
Nice.
that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
It just came to my mind, and you know, being a lawyer, we learn about writing, and well, we learn about writing a different type of document and in a more analytical way.
Mhm.
But I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed the creative process. So again, you know, due to just some life planning and altering elements of what I do to put food on my table, I found the time to write the story that was delivered into my spirit.
You know, that's interesting phraseology too. My favorite songwriter read a book on him, and he explains things almost the same way, creative individual, but he says in songwriting, the songs just come to him and they just sort of pop in. It's like he's got some antenna out there, and that's kind of what it sounds like. And also the idea of writing a book, you had the idea, the statistics and the polls are taken, 85% of the people have thought about writing a book. How many people have actually written a book? 3%. So there's a huge gap between the people who want to and do. So you have, and what do you think is the inspiration for writing, and particularly the interesting way of this serial nature of the books that you have written?
The inspiration really are the people around me, the environment, a part of just what's important to me. And you know, the a further inspiration too is the appreciation for our history, a respect for our history, and a desire to preserve and remind people what history was truly like. So the only way we can improve as a society is to remember from which we came and learn from those mistakes. And the only way we can understand and appreciate culture is to look back at history and the origins of that culture and understand whether it's a culture worth preserving or a culture that needs to evolve and how to evolve.
Interesting, yes, because I always tell people I'm a trained historian academically, and I used to talk to my relatives all the time. I was never in the Second World War, the Korean War, but then I would talk to my uncles and tell me about it because I would never experience it, but I want to know what they had gone through. Could you talk a bit about your writing process? So there's people who write in the morning, there's people who write in the afternoon, there's people who write in the evening, and what is your process of actually writing?
My process for writing is whenever the spirit hits me. I really, I know that there are some people that say, look, I get up at 5 o'clock,
Right?
I write to 10 and take a break. What everybody has to figure out what's their biorhythm
Okay.
in terms of creativity. And so for me, a part of mine is opportunity and inspiration. And opportunity, what that means is, do I have a break in my schedule, right?
Mhm.
Because, as you mentioned at the beginning, there are a number of other things that I do.
Yeah.
So, so some of it is, okay, what does my schedule look like for the day? And, where will my writing time fit into that schedule? So that's opportunity. And inspiration is, when are those spirits talking to me? When are
Mhm.
those characters delivering their story to me? And I may stop, I may be on a plane and, I'm just sitting there and I'm writing, because I'm hearing the characters deliver. There may be times when I'm in my car and I have an opportunity to stop and some ideas come to me and I may dictate them into, the recorder on my phone or
Mm.
jot some notes in the memo or send myself an email. It could be in the middle of the night. And it could be that 5 in the morning where I get up and I'm so full of ideas and the characters that I come up to my office and I write. So I'm one of those people that maybe you can just call an opportunist. I write in an opportunistic way.
And if you don't mind me saying so, in a spiritual way too, because you're somehow tuning into the universe that is speaking to you and you're finding inspiration. Because it's one of those things that I know I hear this all the time, which I like my listeners to listen to and say they have writer's block. So I kind of go back to square one. Why do you have writer's block? Why are you writing? If you're not inspired and you don't want to do it, do something else.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you never know what may inspire you. Um, and I'm not going to negate anyone's place, whether they say, okay, I have writer's block or whatever. I'm not going to negate that. I've never been in that mode, so I can't speak to that. But what I will say for me is, you're right. There's sometimes I'm not inspired.
Mm,
And so I don't think it behooves the character necessarily for me to force a story.
mm,
Because I will tell you, I've done that a couple of times, where I said, "Oh, let me see if I can write something right now," and it doesn't feel real for me. I'm not immersed or engaged in the character or in the storyline. For me, there really has to be some inspiration. And again, you never know where that's going to come from. It could be just sitting there looking out the window. It could be you're sitting in an airport and you happen to start watching a little kid crawling around the ground, playing with the toy. So there may be many things. I got inspired. I got
mm,
inspired just several weeks ago. I was on an airplane, and it was quite a long ride. And so we land at our destination, and I stand up, and there's this bulldog that was occupying the seat right in front of mine. And he looked up at me and he kind of smiled at me. And that kind of inspired me. I started thinking about, okay, so why did that dog look so happy? And why was that dog so
Mhm.
content and quiet on the airplane? And that dog kind of manifested kind of some human behaviors in their facial expression. And, so then I started wondering about the life of that dog and kind of making up, okay, so, of course the owner was there, but, you start just kind of making up stories about what that dog's life must be like because he seems so happy. But,
Mhm.
sometimes it's as simple as that.
Interesting. My great aunt, who raised my mom, always was a people watcher. She lived in a very isolated community in upstate Pennsylvania. But whenever she get in public, she was just watching people. I go, yeah, she's very observant. I'm curious, since it's fiction and you're really being inspired by a bulldog, a lot of people want to know, what's the connection between fact and fiction, or do you take elements of real people and real bulldogs and incorporate it into your writing? And what's the connection between fact and fiction?
It ebbs and flows. Sometimes there's a pretty significant connection, and sometimes there's, a very thin connection, but it has to be, for me as a writer, it has to be somewhat realistic. I know there's some people that um, write thrillers, things that are very much, imagination. Um, I think that's great for those writers. My mind, I shouldn't say has a hard time getting there, but my mind doesn't really lend itself to writing in an abstract,
Mhm.
way such as that. So my writing always has some element grounded in the realities of life. And that's what moves me. Before I went to law school and business school, I also have my MBA, but as an undergrad, one of my majors was sociology. I always liked learning and observing how people react to their environment and behavior. So, kind of like your grandmother, I am a people watcher. I can sit in a room, not say anything, and just watch everything around me. Now, some people may say, okay, that's a little, um, uh, I don't know, shy or introverted behavior. Yes, I've tested as an introvert, believe it or not. But it's because I just like studying people's behavior. So back to your question, my writing is grounded in people's behaviors and kind of real behaviors. The deeper part of your question may be, are some of your characters reflective of people you know?
Precisely.
Uh, and, you know, to some extent, but no one individual. You know, one character could be reflective of several people,
Right.
several things that I've experienced. So I I don't think it's fair to people, to totally base a character on an individual. I would hate for someone to do that to me. Um, so I'm respectful of the relationships that I have, but I, the other reason that I kind of take snippets from time to time, um, is because again, my readers will most likely identify with it.
Mm.
I want my readers to sometimes be able to find themselves within a story and connect with a character if that character is real. Um, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, I think it certainly does, because I always tell people, as when I read Portnoy's Complaint, and it's about a young Jewish boy, and I'm not young and I'm not Jewish, but I go, I could identify with the character. And I think this is what literature and great writing does, because you can put yourself in the place of the people or some in that story itself. I'm
Mhm.
curious then too about terms of your background, since you have an educated background, how do you apply law and business? Because I did this myself. I'm an academic, and I go, but now this is a different kind of writing. So I'm curious, how did you make the transition? Did you take classes, read books, talk to people? How and why? How did you accomplish that?
So, how I got from business and law to writing fiction novels is I just did it.
Hmm, okay.
Because again, it's, well, and let me, I don't want to be quite so flippant about it. After I started writing the first novel, um, I said, look, if I want to understand kind of the business side of what I'm doing, I need to um, immerse myself a little bit in the industry. So I went to what's called the Writers Fest here in my city, and joined the Women's National Book Association, and really started associating with people in the industry.
Hmm,
Because to everything you do, even a creative, endeavor, there's a business side to it. So I
sure.
really needed to understand the business side, and I also associated, um, brought experts on board as well. I got a professional editor, Kevin Anderson Associates, to help me refine the book. I mean, I know some individuals that have done everything from soup to nuts, but number one, I didn't have the time for that, and number two, I didn't have the skill set for that. I know when to say I don't know it. you
Hmm,
know, I know what I don't know, and I know where I need help, and I don't have a problem asking for help. I respect expertise, bring them to the table and let them do their thing, to help me get to where I want to land. So I got an editor that also gave me further direction about the industry and how to take my book to the next step. So they did a lot of the developmental work,
sure.
copyright, copy editing work, and all of that. And then, it came to the publication part, delivering the book out there, and, going through the logistics of the printing and getting the ISBN numbers and the Library of Congress numbers and all of those things that I had no idea had to be done or how to do it.
I see.
And so the Kevin Anderson Associates put me in touch with a hybrid publisher, um, and that's how I got the book out there, and how I got from being a lawyer, teacher, corporate board member, blah blah blah, to being an author. And I appreciate those team of people because, they positioned the book to receive the acclaim that it has.
There are different options, and I wonder if you could address that a little bit. There's self-publishing, hybrid, and traditional publishing. What was the thought process there, and why did you go with hybrid?
I went with hybrid, and let me back up to kind of the point A. Is you're right; those are the choices, and uh, again, for me, kind of the doing it myself, self-publishing. Again, it was a time factor; it was a comfort factor. I didn't want to take the time. I didn't have the time. I didn't want to take the risk.
Hmm,
Um, and I felt I put myself on a timeline. Maybe if I had been much, much, decades younger, I might have taken that venture, but I didn't want to do that. I started looking at traditional public publishing, but I got a little bit frustrated in the process. Sending out query letters to get a literary agent. That's another high hill to climb. I may go that route at some point, once I really understand what this industry is and how it works. Um, uh, Querying is a tough process for most people. And you have to find that right person that gives you a yes. Um, and so when I found the hybrid, I thought that would work for me because it allowed me to go along for the learning ride. I was able to learn about this publishing process. I had a greater voice in the end product than I would
Mhm.
have otherwise. And I've always been one um, to invest in myself. And so I said, even with my own education, right? It's an investment when you go for higher education and you start writing checks and you're taking lots of time. It's an investment in me. And I think I'm my best investment on this earth, right? Because if I don't invest in myself, then a lot of things don't follow in terms of my life's goals. So I said, okay, take this investment, partner with this company, and it was Girl Friday Productions. Again, Kevin Anderson Associates put me in touch with Girl Friday. They've had several New York Times bestsellers and other successful books that they have helped put out in the public.
Hmm.
So, we talked with each other a number of times and said, okay, this works. And they held my hand and we moved forward. Um, I joined with them, partnered with them on the first two books. And it's book by book. You're not tied to a long-term relationship. You can take advantage of as many or as few of the offerings that they have. They bring people to the table. When it was time to think about an audiobook, they said, hey, do you want to make this an audiobook? And we talked about the pros and cons, and I finally decided, okay, yeah, let's make it an audiobook. It'll help the marketing. And they took it through the process. I never would have known how to do that, who to call. And they make it seem seamless, but sitting back and learning, I was able to learn about the process. Now, the question is, would I try to do all of this on my own? Never will I ever. But I have talked with some authors that, now have put enough books out there where they basically just do everything from A to Z, and it works for them. But you've just got to figure out what's the best thing for your lifestyle, for who you are as an individual. Also, your resources, your financial resources. How much do you want to invest in this? So, yeah, so that's what works for me.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about, although we've had a good discussion, is tell us about the books themselves and the stories. So,
Yeah.
plot lines, who this is about, the family, the legacy. Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, this story is about a family called the Briscos, and it starts in the early 1900s, um, where you have the Briscoe family, and they are freed, first generation freed slaves, and they embark upon life after slavery. It focuses, although they have many children, this story focuses on the two youngest ones, Dublin and Tim, and it's how they navigate those years being first generation out of slavery and deal with all of the dilemmas and challenges, everything from look, Dublin is a very ambitious person, regardless of where he lands in the economic scale. He's always looking for how to get to the next rung, and he's willing to make whatever sacrifices need to be made in order to achieve that. His brother, Timothy, is a slightly different person. He is just naturally smart. Um, the thing with Tim, though, and something that existed in many families, that lived on plantations, whether as freed individuals or enslaved individuals, some of the children didn't always belong to the father. They could have been children of this plantation owner or slave master. So that was the situation in this particular family. So Timothy actually was the son of the plantation owner, and he spends a great part of his life dealing with that reality. And also, again, he's just a very naturally smart individual. But the relationship that he has with his mother is very troubled, because when she looks at him, she is reminded of how he came into being.
Mhm.
And for, um, you know, enslaved females, that was a horrific thing, because essentially he was the product of a rape.
Mhm.
And so, mentally, that was tough for her to have a good relationship with Timothy. So you see how that plays out, over the course of the 2 books, and maybe even the 3rd book, which is a work in process, but, all of the characters are speaking to me. Um, but anyhow, so the fact that Timothy has kind of an abusive relationship with his mother, her name is Betsy, by the way, and Dublin has a slightly different, more of a transactional type of relationship
Mm.
with his mother, with Betsy. That creates a little bit of a chasm within
Sure.
their relationship. And Timothy, being the youngest, he ends up being the only one at home at one point, with Betsy. So, there you start seeing real elements of their relationship. And Dublin, even though they all live in the same town, again, remember, his relationship is transactional. So he's able to kind of say, look, this is an element I don't want in my life. Now I have my own family,
Right.
and I'm trying to get somewhere in life, right? So again, you see all of these approaches to, how we're moving forward. Each person, each character has their own way of coping with the remnants of enslavement. Some use it as inspiration
Mhm.
to move up. Others say, "Gosh, I'm stuck. I have so many horrific memories that it affects." It turns them into someone that experiences sometimes mental illness or depression, um, and so it's just interesting. It's interesting to see, and we are like that as human beings today,
Sure.
right? We can all be exposed to maybe the same trauma, but we process it in different ways to achieve our goals. Some people are oppressed by it and stunted, stifled, and paralyzed by it. Others use it as a launching pad, and to inspire them to move up and achieve certain and overcome. All
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
And
So
because of each character's different approach, it's going to affect how they raise their children,
sure.
the next generation. And we have seen, and we see in, whether it's families of immigrants or, or Black families or other cultures, um, how the relationships and the generations, certain traumas and certain behaviors just tend to follow generation after generation.
Yep, and that's actually a good question I did wanna ask. You mentioned a 3rd book, so I'm also curious then what the plans are. Is there a 3rd book or in process? Is there a prequel? Like, where are you going from here? 2 out, where do we go?
Well, there is a third book work in process, and I, I have I've there are two different starts to it. Okay, that
Mm,
may turn into one, but what we are probably going to see is a little more focus on Betsy, the mother, and the first book, is basically about the brothers' relationships. The second book focuses a little bit more on Dublin than it does Timothy and Dublin's family. And so this third book, the characters are really talking about the relationship between Betsy and her sons. And I think that will tell us a lot about the relationship between a mother and her offspring when the mother is trying to fight her own battles and demons. Um, and how some children are able to compartmentalize and move on and with their lives, and maybe they found other inspirations, and that's the choice that some people have to make in a parental relationship, and it's a sad thing. And then some children are able to preserve that relationship, but again, find ways to move forward, but some can't and don't. So that's what I think we'll see in that third book.
mm,
And you may see Betsy has talked to me a little. This sounds weird. Betsy has talked to me,
no,
but yes, Betsy spiritually has hit me as, we see some women who do come from just very traumatic beginnings, and they can become actually, they can turn that around and find ways of reviving their lives later in their life, finding inspiration for making a change. It may be. Here's a little bit of an analogy. Um, and I do have children, and actually, I have a granddaughter, and I am finding that I'm a little bit of a different person now with my granddaughter than I was
mm,
when I was raising my children. Right? We learn, we grow, we change, and I think we may see a little bit of that in Betsy, although she has harbored a lot of anger, and rightfully so, about her beginnings. Will she become a different person? And how will she impact the later generations? And does she have some nuggets of wisdom and ways of living life, knowing where she came from?
mm. It's interesting. It doesn't sound strange at all because you already said that the characters and the stories are speaking to you, so you wait for that character to development, and that's what I'm curious about too. Because a lot of authors or potential authors, I'm curious about what you could recommend. In other words, what are some actionable tips that you have found that might assist other authors or aspiring authors to actually do what they should be doing and writing?
Yes. First of all, I would say find your method. I have talked to a number of authors who have different methods. Some write notes on note cards and then kind of move and shuffle them around and develop that way. For me, and this is just to me, I come in a quiet space. Um, and and even if I'm on an airplane, I have in earplugs, and so I write as I'm hearing. I just write, and I had to learn to not try to perfect as I'm writing. That's the
Mhm.
lawyer in me.
Yeah.
I want to write and then stop and correct it and make it perfect, then move on. I can't do that with this side of my brain. I just need to just keep writing, capture the words, type, 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 write, write, write. Um, because I want to make sure I'm hearing exactly what those characters are delivering. And then at some point, whether it's at the end of the chapter or wherever it is, then I can go back and refine and put it in order and make it, more of a logical story. Because by the time you're done, I can't tell you how many drafts of my manuscript, especially of the first book that I have, many, many drafts. So just capture it as you're hearing it. Um, to some extent, even forget the typos. You can go back and deal with that later.
Mhm.
That's the one thing that for me, I find I can't I can't be a perfectionist about this. I just have to capture the story. So that's the only thing I can say. But the other thing is find whatever method works for you. This is a creative process. If you need music, I know people that say they need music in the background. Again, some people say I need to do it first thing in the morning. Some say I have to do it at night. Find your biorhythm, find your way of being and connecting with your characters.
Yeah, there's different ways of writing, and that's why I think it's a good question to ask because this is what authors are looking for, and what works for you may not work for another person, but they appreciate you sharing what you have done and what you've been able to find your path. The spontaneous kind of writer inspired kind of reminds me of Jack Kerouac, who's apparently just sat down and wrote on the road. I mean, it's just unbelievable a person could do it, but it can be. Now, of course, since we've talked about your process, we've talked about the inspiration, we talked about the story and the plot line, which is very fascinating. Of course, everybody wants to know, well, now I want to know, where do I get this? Because this is something that I've been listening for and waiting for. So how do they get a hold of you? How do they get a hold of books? Where can they be found?
Yes, well, the easiest way to get a hold of the book and get a hold of me is through the author website, which is teresamosleyssebastian.com. And you know, if you Google Teresa Mosley Sebastian, even if you misspell it, it'll pop it up. You know how Google is; it'll figure out what you're trying to reach. And so through that website are the three primary places where you can pick up the books: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and bookshop.org. So there are links to each one of those. And from time to time, we run a Goodreads giveaway. We just finished one where we, give away some books. So there's a link to my Goodreads author page as well. In the website, not only will you have access to purchase the books, there are also some little nuggets of freebies there. I have a couple of blogs about the characters and a short story, a very short story. That's actually a true story. And it's about me. So, it's when I was a little girl, and
Oh,
it's a little bit of embellishment, but I was a little girl, and my sisters put me on a tricycle and were pulling me up a tree on my trike. So it's one of those traumatic. It's kind of a funny traumatic memory. One of the few things I remember when I was at around the age of 4. But anyhow, so that's a fun thing to read about, and you can also learn a little bit more about me.
well, very interesting, very insightful, talking about the process of publishing, how you got this, how you develop your own way of writing, and the characters, inspiration. I know you're a busy person. Thank you very much for sharing all this. This is invaluable for authors and potential authors. I appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much for being my special guest today.
Thank you, and thanks to your audience. I appreciate it, and pick up the book.
Yes, absolutely. Go and get it now. Don't wait. Thank you so much, Teresa.
Okay, you're quite welcome.
We want to help everybody, and this is a great inspiration for writers. Get out there, do what you need to do, and do it today. So get those books because they might sell out. You never know. I want to thank the sponsors of the Doctor of Digital podcast. That is the publishers of both Burning America and also On Track Ian Hunter. Make sure you're looking because I've got more products and more books coming. But in the meantime, I appreciate your time and checking in today. If you want to know more about me, I'm the Idea to Author coach, guiding your journey from draft to best-selling author. You can join the free Facebook community right now, the Idea to Author coach. Until next time, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you checking in today. We've got more authors coming, more things coming, more helps, more tips. Get those books out there. As my friend Daniel always says, more books, more books. So until next time, I appreciate you checking in. Till next time, Deus Vult.